If a school is going to teach your babies how to hate themselves, it must die and your baby must live. If schooling will teach you to hate your family and your beloved because they have a different way of being in the world, then schooling must die. So you can live.
Today we got some very, very special guests with us. I don't even know. How would you introduce these people?
Well, we introduce them by relation. So I'll start to my right. Christine is a friend, sister, colleague, to me, mother, partner, mentor, powerful scholar, and I think someone who exudes love and also the combination of how love gets actualized through struggle. I met Christine years ago, actually, as I first came into some of this work, and you've been like a powerful sister to me, and I think a guide and my own sort of like North Star of like how to move through this work with integrity, always. And I'm just so honored to be sitting here with you and hearing about this incredible work on mothering, the way that mothering, as I've always heard you talk about it, the spirit of mothering and how that both exceeds and challenges and also could be a point of like jumping off for what we do in the work of education struggle. So welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And then I'll invite you to introduce your relationship with powerful auntie we have right here.
Oh, thanks, Kinjis, for that introduction.
Yes.
Because now I have to attempt to follow that. To my right, I have the one and only, the godmother of the Bay Area.
Hey.
You go anywhere, I go somewhere, if I drop this person's name, it's either free or they're adding some extras to whatever I'm getting around the Bay Area. Outside of the Bay Area, this person I'm introducing still drop the same name. It's at least like 50% off. Right? This profound, beautiful mother who I have been blessed to grow up alongside, and I have been mentored by her. But I think both subconsciously, where she just is praying for all of us younger scholars in the Bay Area, and then also very intentionally through our work together, we have moved beyond imagined closeness. Yeah. We've had some very intense spiritual journeys together and experiences that I don't think either of us were ready for, but have both brought us closer and elevated us into closer proximity to our calling. And so it's been an honor to work alongside you, to learn from you, learn with you. And I'm super terrified in a good way of what comes out today, to be in conversation with you. I want y'all to welcome the one and only mother, auntie, Allyson Tintiangco-Cubales.
Jeez. That's a lot of pressure.
Now that we've introduced y'all, why don't you introduce yourselves? Like, how would you describe yourself? How would you introduce yourself?
I think I like it better. The way you introduced me. I usually... So interesting you call me auntie or tita, or, you know. My identity for a very, very long time, actually still continues today, is ate. So ate references, it's a Tagalog word for older sister. But it seems like everybody calls me that. And I don't even know if I named myself that at some point in my early career. But I feel like generation after generation, people call me Ate Allyson. So my name, is definitely connected to those identities, of being Ate even long before I was mother. So yeah, that's how I would introduce myself. Besides all that, I've been teaching for a quarter of a century.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's been a while. And I enjoy that. I still, till this day, quarter of a century later, I still really enjoy teaching. I am a mother. I'm a mother of my daughter, Mahalaya. Her name means love and freedom. But I think even before her, I was practicing mothering or mother work in so many spaces. I didn't even know that's what it was. And to me, that really just means, showing love in all the spaces that I'm in. I'll pass the mic over to my colleague friend, Christy.
Hi, y'all. Thank you. And it's Ate. I think, I don't even know. I think for me, I also identify as a mama right now. And that's like my role, my big role, but also as a femtor and a sister and daughter. Those have been like major roles right now. Back at home, my community, they call me xihui, which means turquoise fire, or turquoise coyote, which could also mean getting myself into trouble. And I often do that. And there's like a jokester energy in me. And I think that's why they gave me that name back at home. And my son really pushed me forward in doing this work. My son's name's Vega. His middle name is Tlaloc, which means, ¿cómo se dice in English? I'm trying to think about it in English and I can't. Obsidian rain, in Nahuatl. And his first name is land where the water gathers. And it's Purepecha, to honor our fellows, my partners, lineage in Mexico. So yeah, Hanitio does definitely drive that medicine in everything he does and everything he challenges me with. And so including this work, which is really sharp work, really hard work, but also really beautiful, lovely work. And it's really transformed me, and it's really helped us make a crack in the canon of how we think about mothers, parenting, and labor. But yeah, I feel like I'm always in between worlds doing this work. And I just, my son has been my medicine in that way. Yeah.
Y'all both dive in, of course, in your descriptions of yourselves of the topic for today. But to be explicit, what would you say were maybe the experiences or lessons that kind of brought you into this work that looks at like the intersections of motherhood and academia?
Well, actually, my partner and I became pregnant my first year PhD. I remember I came to you. I was like, I'm pregnant. And it's like before the semester or the quarter ended. Mm-hmm. I was kind of freaking out a bit. I was like, oh shit. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I remember telling my closest like friends, the Kansas was really, really important. In that first year, I remember like telling you and telling others, like, I'm going to become a parent. And I was pretty nervous. And we had, I forgot if it was summer break. I can't remember. We had a break. And then I was a lot more like physically pregnant on campus. But I was already feeling excluded from the university. I already knew my body didn't belong. As the first Chicana Indígena on campus, I was reading everything around, inequities in higher ed. I was living them every day. Just the physicality of getting to campus was already like hard as a pregnant presenting person. Even sitting on a desk with the belly was really hard. And so that led to some just conversation around like inequities on campus as a pregnant presenting person with other folks who were pregnant, which they very rarely come out and tell you. And that led to organizing. But it happened after Juanito was born. So I was already kind of tracking this stuff down. Like, I feel like I don't belong. I don't feel like I'm seen. I'm called the pregnant person. I don't have a name. So these markers for me, my friend Cecilia Caballero, another mama scholar, and I named maternal microaggressions, started to track these. And it led to organizing while I was pumping with our other colleague, Nora, our homie Nora Cisneros, shout out to her, and Liana Hidalgo, who I also organized on campus with around inequities that parenting people were facing on campus. And so that led to two different like organizations, Chicana Mother Work and Mothers of Color in Academia. And we organized on campus around these inequities. And so I was just basically organizing, and I have to shout out Dolores Delgado Bernal because she was a visiting scholar at the time. And we were reading on Chicana feminist methodologies. And I'm like, we don't see the like maternal narrative in here. Like, this is important work. Like, how then do we build on methodologies that are central to the corporate realities of folks of color, particularly pregnant presenting people and these inequities? How then do we like contribute to what's missing in the canon? And she's like, I kind of got the blessing, like, this could be your dissertation. And I'm like, what? No one cares. No one cares, right? And she's like, this is work that needs to happen. And I'm like, okay, well then I guess I'm going to write a dissertation on this, and while also organizing. And it was rough. Like, I think, I know you were going through some stuff at UCLA, and then at the other, like the parallel, other folks, like parenting students, were facing some discrimination on campus. They were being silenced. They were being threatened to get their funding removed. Like, it was just really violent in these very subtle ways. And that kind of led towards basically writing these things down, publishing around it. And the anthology came out of like this struggle, and not just my struggle, but just a collective struggle. And that's also exhausting. Like, you're parenting, you're writing a dissertation, you're organizing on campus, right? You're working 2 jobs on campus. It was exhausting. So I feel like there was a point where I hit a burnout phase, and I was like, okay. And I know we'll talk about this later, but the importance of rest and restoration and care work for the self as a form of activism really started to kind of like surface for me, and just kind of focusing on paying attention to like myself and my family so that I don't fizzle out. But that was part of the collective struggle that led towards this work. It's just the inequities and not being silent about it, in helping each other collectively to coordinate and organize collectively through care work to change it a bit, even if for a little bit. Yeah. The coffee's kicking in.
Thank you for all that work. Like, I'm just listening to you describe it, and I'm like, thank you. You know, because that organizing work, the caring for other mothers is part of being, you know, like a community engaged, community responsive mother scholar. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. Like, I think about it, I'm like, I wish I had you on my campus. My story is slightly different. My origin story starts from infertility. Like, I start, when I think about my origin, and when I was coming here, I was like, oh, I should really tell the story before the articles, you know? And for me, that starts with struggling to identify as a scholar, period. And then landing this position at San Francisco State as a professor, tenure track. And getting married the same year. Ambitious. And thinking it was all going to kind of fall into place. I wanted to have a kid. We tried for 5 years, you know, like, and it was a struggle, you know, like the stress around wanting to have a baby, but not being supported, by the institution to pursue that because of it felt like everything, all the pressures that comes along with being a professor just was not conducive to allow my body to accept being a mom. So I just want to acknowledge that first before I talk about then becoming a mom. It was a struggle for me because it wasn't just about being a professor. I was also really involved in my communities, specifically developing Pinay and Pinoy educational partnerships, or PEP. And I felt like in that space, I was very loved and I loved back. But there was also that commitment to that took up a lot of space in my body too. And then also just being an ate. You'd think that if you're an ate, older sister, that it would be easy to become a mother. And those things are just not synonymous. And they're also very difficult to hold in your body. And so for me, it took a long time to get pregnant. And we struggled, my husband and I struggled through it. I mean, he's also an educator. And we gave like 200%, to our students and our communities. And we couldn't just have our own family. So that's kind of where it begins for me, because these institutions were already violent to mothers before I became a mother. And so it all happens during sabbaticals. Taking a break, leaving the institution for a little bit, and allowing myself, to become me, and so I took some time, and then eventually kind of gave up too, in wanting to become pregnant. I was like, okay, if I'm gonna be a, mama for the community, I'm gonna be a mama for the community, and then just kind of left the idea of being a physical, actually birthing a child, and then I got pregnant. That is not a surprise to people. Stress makes it very difficult for you to get pregnant or to be healthy. And so I got pregnant. I'm trying not to make it sound so easy, but really a lot of it had to do with rest and restoration to be able to allow myself to be the womb that it was. So I got pregnant. And it was hard because I was already in my tenure clock was year 4. And it was so close to either I go up for tenure or not. And I didn't have enough publications to be real. I had a lot of, I think, good things about my experience as FState, like teaching it went well, but the part that I was really nervous about was publications. And here I was like trying, as I was pregnant, trying to write and trying to, feed the baby, like it was a lot of challenge. And it's hard to explain. Like, and you were saying you're sitting at a desk and your belly's touching the table. And I literally would be like trying to write, these articles because of the pressure, to get tenure. So when I was pregnant with Mahal, I said, well, fuck it, I'm not going to write. Because it was stressing me out. And I felt like if it was stressing me out, it must be stressing the baby out. Yeah. So I was like, forget it. I don't get tenure, and stressed over other things, just trying, not stressed, but like focused more on like just having her in my belly. While I was pregnant with her, I was also having a bunch of students over at my house, trying to work on their theses, their master's theses. And so it was so interesting though, like they were so supportive of me. I was so supportive of them. And it really created this lovely or this wonderful symbiotic relationship around me raising them and them raising me. And so I did have a deadline on March 1st, a writing deadline, to turn in an article on Pinayism, which is one of the things that I've been working on for many, many years, focusing on Filipino women. And I went into labor that morning. That's like one of the best excuses of not turning shit on time,
for a while.
For a while. And I just actually recently told Mahalaya this story when we were doing a ritual and I was telling her the story. She goes, I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was born the day that you're supposed to turn in that Pinayism article. And then I said, oh, that's why we're going to get Pinayism tattoos. Because you are Pinayism. You know, you were meant to be born, not the book, not the article at that time. And so she was born. I'm sorry if I'm taking too long to tell the story.
No, you're taking the right amount.
She was born. And it was 17 hours of labor. How many hours were you in labor?
20.
Dang, right?
It's exhausting. Huh?
I said, goodness gracious.
Yeah, like, that's a long time.
That's our kids' personality, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Takes their time?
Oh,
Does yours
yeah.
take their time?
Fucking lollygagging it.
My child takes her time. Anyways, so yeah, I was like, what is going on? Just come out, right? So anyways, so after 17 hours of labor, have this beautiful baby who was actually premature. And had a whole host of things happen. Her heart wasn't developed. She wasn't able to hold down food. She got jaundice. I mean, like, it was like a series of things that I don't talk about in any of the articles. Like, it's really hard to talk about or to publish about. And I felt completely inadequate. I was like, I was meant to be, like a teacher, not a mother. Like, so I was like trying to create these strange sort of binaries between like what I know I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And I felt like I was not a good mom because she was not, I felt like she wasn't fully developed. And it took like a year to realize I was a mom and she wasn't going to go back to wherever she came from. I would literally say, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm such a good auntie. She could just go back to your real mom, you know? And trying to really come to terms with being a mom was difficult for me. I got no support from the university. Doesn't mean I didn't get support from my colleagues, because there were a lot of beautiful colleagues that came through to support me. But the institution only gives you 12 weeks. Officially. But, I'm like, okay, 12 weeks plus a sabbatical, plus also leave without pay was what I needed. So I don't know if a lot of people know my story, but I took time off. Like it was not enough time at the university for me to really become the mother that I needed to become for my child. And so that kind of is the beginning of my story. Of course, there's the academic side of the mother scholarship, but for me to even become a mother scholar, I needed to explain how I became a mother.
Yeah.
Y'all's stories, what's coming up in my heart as I'm hearing these stories of like origin or points of initiation into this kind of work is actually something I first heard, I think, Christine, from you or Nora, maybe Nicole, this like the first year hearing the story of Coyolxauhqui. And this medicine or story or, invitation to think about the ways in which women or womb carriers are required to be torn apart, or are often torn apart for the benefit or for the sake of everyone else, And it sounds to me like what's coming to my spirit is like the ways in which the requirements of academia, the university, schooling, are incompatible with wholeness for mothers, for mothering, like having to bifurcate oneself, quite literally, like turn this in or birth a child. And I am wondering, like, this work of mothering as pedagogy that you both have both expressed and done in the work that you do, is that a pathway for healing? Does the story of Coyolxauhqui map on at all to what we learn about, mothering as pedagogy for healing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting because this generation of students, I'm blessed to work in Chicano studies. And so I'm learning that this generation of students haven't been exposed to her story. And I share that with them and I explain it to them. And I actually wrote this one paper on, I think it's the kind of like not the origin story of Coyolxauhqui, but the story around her image challenging the patriarchy, but also the remembrance of the first femicide historically, the dismemberment of her body. And I found out through these old archaeological and anthropological analysis of her story. And I show this to my students. I show them the image. It's like this massive stone that was unearthed in Mexico City in 1978, I think. And I showed this. I'm like, let's talk about her body. Like, what do you see? Let's analyze it together. And every single class I teach, it doesn't matter if it's intro to Chicana studies. It doesn't matter if it's gender sexuality. I bring in Coyolxauhqui because to me, that's been a really important image. Actually, it's part of the cover of the Chicana Mother Work anthology and some of our gear. And I'm like, there's a birth story to her that no one's talking about, because if you analyze the in Espanol, it's like lonjitas, the little rolls. That's a symbol of birthing, and her pendulous breasts are also a symbol of producing milk. And her body's been dismembered. And so we talk about this image and the importance of this image and how the Academy absolutely splits body, mind, spirit, her head being one of them. So the body is not connected to this intellectual capacity that we're all one piece, right? And Irene Lara actually talks about that split. They want us to be dismembered, to feel, to show up with heart, and also think and analyze and create nuevas teorías, right? And so the mothering as pedagogy for me, I show up first as a mom. And I let my students know, look, I'm a parent. I have to humanize my experience. Do not dismember me. I'm not a machine. I'm human. I care for my child. I care for myself, and I care for you. And I show up with love. And they freak out. They're like, why would you care? And because you're somebody's child, and I'm responsible at this moment to show up for you in ways that I can show love, respect, and you're a holistic person, the same as I am. And so it's, for me, the mothering pedagogy, I think I haven't really sat to theorize around it, with the exception of I show up as my whole authentic self. And I needed to be in a space that actually honored that. And I feel like Chicano studies has been a good place for that. Although, we all different, disciplines have issues, right? But for me, I'm more focused on the student and the relationship with the student that I can build with them. And so I allow them, and that's fucked up to say, but I give ourselves permission to plan this class together. There's some content I want to revise and share with them, but I have them support themselves and engaging with when they want deadlines, what is our policy around submitting stuff, when it's best for them. Just come talk to me. Don't think that you can approach me if you need support in any kind of way. I'm here to hear you. I'm here to listen. I'm here to, to uplift you. And they're not used to that. They're just not used to that. And so my mothering pedagogy really comes from a place of I want to treat my students the way I hope my son is being treated in the classroom, and how I hope other little children and other young people are being treated in the classroom. And I've experienced some things with my son in the classrooms that he's been, but I show up in that way. And a lot of my students want to become educators. And I'm like, you don't have to teach a certain way. You can really change that paradigm. And I feel like they've never had permission to think outside of that. And so my mothering pedagogy is really informed of just body, mind, spirit, just kind of centering heart with love and respect. But mainly it's to humanize myself so that they can also humanize themselves and their needs as students. And that's hard work. They're not used to it. I gave them an option last week. I'm like, what do y'all want to do? What do you need right now? And they're like, crickets, right? And I'm like, no one's asked you what you needed before? Professors haven't asked you what you needed before? And they're like, don't know what to say, right? And so I'm like, okay, we'll continue working on that. It's only been week 5, week 6, right? So we're still kind of getting to know me as their educator, as their teacher, but also as I call them colleagues, even though they're undergrads. I'm like, we're colleagues here. We've got to work on that, right? That mothering pedagogy, for me, it's just kind of like what feels right at that moment, but mainly stepping into my mothering role when I come into the classroom space. Yeah. Hard work.
I want to watch you. I want to see you in person, watching you teach the students with that mother pedagogy. I really appreciate that. I'm very similar, I think, in the pedagogical side. I do want to kind of take it back a little bit. Like, I feel like we're talking about mothering as it's a thing that is the same for all kinds of people.
Right.
And so I want to acknowledge that my mothering sounds very similar to Christine's, but it may not sound similar to other mothers in the institution or academia. So I want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's why we're here, probably because we have some similarities in the ways we would approach mothering. But I just want to acknowledge there's a difference between motherhood and mothering or mother work. Those are different things. And motherhood comes from, patriarchy. And so particularly for mothers, we are in motherhood, we're expected to be the sole provider for our children. We are expected to give up our lives for our children. I just want to acknowledge how messed up that is. And then also this idea that motherhood means that we are able to socialize our children to be successful in whatever society. Those are sort of these guardrails around motherhood. And so important that when we kind of juxtapose mother work or mothering, that we make decolonial or we make particular choices around the ways in which we mother. Because if I was to use the motherhood, as the basis for mother pedagogy or mothering pedagogy, then I would be that teacher that would be oppressive. I'm just trying to make it simple. But mothering, because the purpose of the two things are very different, the idea of motherhood is really about maintenance, sustainability in a particular system. Mothering allows us to be more liberating in our practices because the goal is collective liberation, at least in my understanding of the kind of mothering that I hope I'm participating in. And so I want to acknowledge that first before I then say, yes, in my classroom, because as a mother to my child, Mahalaya, I try to create opportunities for her to be able to liberate herself. And so that's the same thing I do in the classroom. I don't liberate my students. That's not even possible, In my mind, I try to create opportunities for them to dig deep, find ways to love themselves, to give them the capacity to ask questions that are hard questions that maybe I can't even answer. And then definitely, to find, sacred purpose in their life, no matter what class I'm teaching. Right now, I'm happen to be teaching Asian American family and identity. So it's kind of the timing of this, podcast works out. But I also want to say that what I do there is the same thing I do with my child. Don't get me wrong. I don't pay everybody's tuition, but the things that I practice with my child in terms of the learning is the same as what happens in the classroom. And so I just want to acknowledge that is because I've made a specific or very, very deliberate choice to mother in this way. And which is very different than what is expected of mothers to be. Just as it's the same as teaching, like we're expected to be some kind of way, but we make choices about the way we teach. We make choices about our pedagogy. We get pressures from other things, but we make choices about the kind of mother, scholar, teacher, community engaged activist, whatever you want to call us. Like we make choices around that.
Yeah. I appreciate you with the differentiation, right, between the two. And thinking about even in how there's similarities, right? And you're saying how y'all might mother. But I also, like, Christine, your work focuses particularly on like this intersection of care, right? In the academy. You said a little bit about it. Can you share a little bit more, though, expound on like, what does that look like in practice? Or what does Chicana mothering look like in relationship to care in like the academic setting?
As you said that the sun is coming out. I just thought the light change. That's like an ongoing journey, I feel, because something you said earlier, Ate, I'm gonna call you Ate. If that's okay.
Yeah, it's an honor.
And that's okay. I'm in need of a big sister. Hold on to that. I remember that when I was pregnant, who are friends now, were students at UCLA, really provided a lot of care for me, and that made me feel less invisible. And so those were like the beginning moments of care work. Care work for me before I became a parent was deeply embedded in ceremony. I want to shout out the folks who are sweating this morning. The women are sweating today. But I came to this ceremony instead, right? And so that for me was really important. Ceremony, sweat lodge, Sundance, the fasting I used to do every season. That was care work for me because I was actually carrying the fire for my community. And you're just picking up everybody's stuff, right? And so I had to take care of myself in that way. But once I became a mama and I was in the academy, that kind of was taken away a bit. So I kind of had to relearn how to reuse that medicine in different ways. And so I'm still learning how to do that care work for myself particularly so that I can be supportive to students. So the care work, sometimes it's as simple as just listening to students or just checking in with them. I feel like there's an intuition that, I don't know, you could tell when somebody's just having a hard day or somebody's like a student's hungry. And and this is before I became a mom. I was just born this way. I think it's my grandpa's fault. Like, this is just how I've heard of him being as a person back in El Rancho, back in Mexico. His intuition of caring for other people in the little ranchito, and then the same for my aunties. I think it's generational. They would care for folks who didn't have anything to eat. They would make burritos and pass them out like for folks who didn't have anything to eat. And they still do that for those who still remain alive. So I think it's just part of this genetic and spiritual makeup of just being intuitive to what my students may or may not need. But I think I'm relearning how to take care of myself, and I don't get to go to ceremony as much, especially with COVID happening. We can't be inside of a lodge, but they're coming back, which is really exciting. But the care work definitely is just the simple as checking in with folk. But to be quite honest, COVID's really challenged that part of care work. And I mean, for me right now, so that I can fill up my cup, so that I can be available to my son, to myself, to my partner, to my students, is just going back to this concept about rest and restoration that I feel like didn't have permission to like practice that. And I had to have this conversation with my partner. We both had this conversation together that we don't need to be ill in order for us to rest. And it can't get to that point anymore. And the institution's really good about like, well, if you're ill, that's when you could be absent. I'm not about that. And so I'm kind of sitting with just resting and being okay with not opening up the laptop and checking emails all the time. But the care work also manifests in ways where I do leave my office door open because I know students sometimes come by the hallway and I can support them and sometimes just listening to them. And something I had to learn, and I'm still learning at this age, is that I can't fix everyone. And it hurts me because I was always like, okay, let's solution-based, let's fix everything. I'm learning this through this idea of rest and restoration and self-care, to take care of myself, is that I just can't fix problems for everyone. But sometimes it just needs someone to listen, someone to have a snack in the office, someone can walk him to the coffee shop to get him a coffee. And that's it. And that's okay. So I'm kind of like in between that journey for care work. And it's reciprocated, because when students come with gifts and I'm all embarrassed about it, it's really hard for me to like receive. I've had students drop off enchiladas and I'm like, why are you doing this? Right? They're like, because we know you're hungry. And I'm like, how do you know I'm hungry? I will eat this for sure. Or they'll come, they hear the things I say in class, and I'm really surprised about the care work that I'm also receiving on their behalf. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's a huge gift. That they think about me in that way, that they want to care for me as well. And I'm pretty shocked about that. But I'm also learning to open up and receive. That's a different kind of medicine. And so I'm like, all right, fair. That's fair. Mm-hmm. But I'll stop there.
Pushing back against some of the motherhood, right? You only give and you don't receive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like receiving. Actually, you know how you said earlier, you call me the godmother of the Bay.
Well, I called you originally the godfather, and then I was like, whoa, that came out way too quickly. Why did I just... Anyhow, godmother for sure.
It's so funny because you said that, and right after this, because, you know, I kind of dressed up a little bit, going to a bridal shower of my students, and I'm literally... my husband and I are going to be the godparents at their wedding. So I think it's just funny to bring it up that way, like the reciprocation, and then also like these relationships that are just so life-giving, life-saving. I was thinking about when you were talking, when I actually before I went into labor, they gave me a baby shower, you know, some of my students and some of the PEP teachers. And they made this necklace. Everyone had a bead, you know, and I was like, they created ceremony out of my, you know, like birthing process. Everyone had a bead, and then each person put a symbol on the bead, you know, so that I would have this set of beads or this necklace to bring in with me in labor. And I was clenching that for 17 hours. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, but I felt that. I felt the support through that. And then all the high school students that were in PEP wrote these little letters. I still have them on our altar. These little tiny letters that they rolled up and put into a bottle for me. And once in a while, you know, pull them out and read them and know that it's not just me giving. It's a relationship, you know, that they are also giving back. And it's just so beautiful, you know. Like I think about that, and I think sometimes people are like, oh, you give so much. I'm like, I get a lot. And I appreciate that. I try to redefine that, you know, like, yeah, we give a lot, but then like, you know, part of that means growing. And if you're really growing a community of people as a mama or, you know, it also means that they learn how to grow up and also be there for you. It's beautiful though. And I've had people pass in my life, you know, in the last 5-6 years. And like students, former students and students, teachers I've worked with, like they've been there, like as family, as community. And so I feel like that tells me that I did all the right things. Because I think sometimes the institution is telling you you're not. They're like, you're going to get punished if you don't do this. You're going to get punished if you do that. I even had one of the administrators, I won't name names, but one of the administrators I think it was my second or third year at State, told me I was fucking up. So you're fucking up. And what he was referring to was my commitment to creating PEP in the community. It literally said those words to me. And I was so shocked. I mean, I went out. I didn't let him see me cry, you know. I didn't let him see me cry. But I walked out, went to my office and cried. I was like, what do you mean I'm fucking up? You know, like I feel like I'm doing so much, you know. but he was trying to say, I spend too much time in the community and not enough time writing. Yeah. So those feelings, you know, then were also embedded in this creation of me as an imposter syndrome, like kind of as a professor. But then it also started to feed into my relationship as a mother. You know, I struggled with, I give so much to the community. Am I good enough for my daughter? You know, so there's this toggling back and forth with these insecurities that I lived with. And I mean, I don't feel that way as a 52-year-old with a 19-year-old daughter. I don't feel that way now. But in the middle of all of that, it was just this constant beating myself up, feeling guilty. I'll leave it at that.
You know, I feel like it's a fact, or a well-known fact, that you also marry a bunch of people.
Oh yeah, it's a thing, huh?
But when you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, why y'all both are so blessed by your community, right? Because there are a number of folks who give and give and give, and it's kind of drought over in their territory, right? And I was thinking about the last ceremony that you and I had together. And can I talk about it?
Yeah.
We're both laid out on tables, our eyes covered, and we're engaged in, you know, really intense breath work. And I just remember Allyson saying, I can't. And then she just lets go. And you said, I let out this sound, but you let out this sound first. And I felt her being free. And I was like, I felt like it would be disrespectful to be around you and not take that risk. And so that the sound that you heard coming from me, right, that release coming from me was informed by the courage that you were modeling and the environment that it created. Right? So I'm imagining that y'all get fed in the ways that you get fed, because it almost feels dishonest, right, to not pour back into y'all. But I'm interested in, because I think there's something about what I'm trying to get at, and this is totally off script, about this type of pedagogy compared to a lot of others that I think sound good, they make sense theoretically, but in practice don't have that type of reciprocal relationship. Why do y'all think people feed y'all? Because it's a lot of folks that give and they hungry. What about a mothering pedagogy do you think then feeds you?
I really didn't know that I was the one that made the sound first.
You were first.
Because I've been thanking you for that moment for a long time. Since then, I heard Tiffany like wail, and then quite literally saw the light, you know, like physically, and my eyes were closed, but I saw like, oh, I'm not alone. Someone next to me is experiencing what I'm experiencing, but is also willing to like yell so that I can see my way. Like, I think that to me that is telling of a lot of things. One, I trusted you. I just trust you. And I feel like we had a very deep conversation, I think, going up. Yeah. So it wasn't just laying out on a bed doing breathing together, and beautiful experience. And I really thank the folks who walked us through that AccuBreath. Yeah. But before we even got to the location that we were at, we were already talking. And in that conversation, we were talking about imagined closeness. This idea that I was kind of critiquing myself and critiquing some other folks for pretending that we're close, you know, like for whatever purposes, like so that we can look aligned, so that, you know, like people know we work together. Like in some ways that's a protection. So I don't want to like totally dismantle that idea. But then I was like, but we don't actually know each other. We really don't know each other. And it's not just like knowing things about each other, because there's that, right? Like I know certain things about you. I know your dog's name is Chauncey, you know? But like it's more like knowing you and experiencing things with you. And so I'm trying to get to the, you know, like why do I think people feed us back is because it's not just about, mothering isn't just about giving them something. It's about experiencing something with them, like being in dialogue with them. That's like a real dialogue, like real questions. Like I feel like actually, I'm glad I didn't prepare for today. Like Tiffany was texting me several times. You ready for this? You doing it? I'm like, sure. But I actually didn't look at the email till today. I mean, because I am swamped, right? But then also because I just trust you enough to come and know that we can have a conversation. Yeah. And so that's how I approach the mothering and the teaching. And like, we're going to be all right. Let's talk through this. Let's figure this out together. I may not have all the answers for you, but I probably think you probably have the answers in there. I just have to like allow that to come out. And I think most of my students, especially the ones that I've worked with closely, like whether it be like during a master's thesis, like relationship or dissertation or mentorship, or, you know, actually anyone who messages me, I'm willing to meet with them, right? But I feel like my biggest goal, this is so, when I'm with somebody, is just to be present at the time. Because there's so many things like happening. But if I can be present for that person and just listen, the answers might come out. They may not come out. But at least that there's a relationship that is being built. And so to me, that's really what it is. Like, what is the relationship that we're building together? And sometimes I do feel guilty because, you know, like I have more resources than my students and more power. And so I don't, sometimes when they do give me like, you know, like the food, I'm like, oh man, you know, I feel bad. I feel bad because, you know, like they don't have as much as we do. You know, I'm just thinking like in this part of my life. But there's also something that happens when you give something to someone. And I know that they're giving to me is also something for them. Like I had this one student who made like the best mochi. I have never tasted mochi like that ever. I try to buy mochi in stores and stuff. It's not the same. But I remember every time I would like, and I would eat it, I would eat at least one in front of her just so that she would know I'm not giving it away, you know? And she would be like, do you like it? And I'd be like, yeah, it's so good. And she's like, that makes me feel good. And I remember that when she said that, I was like, that's why I accept the things, you know, because not just for me. So I'll kind of leave it at that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. That's a good question, Tiff. I don't know. And I don't know if I had teachers that I wanted to give like that to, right? Maybe one, maybe two, but it was a different kind of giving. I do know that when I give to them, it makes me feel good that they're eating. Like for me, food, a ceremony is, we had a lot of food insecurities growing up, and food for me is so sacred. And so I still catch myself buying snacks for them and taking snacks. Or I'm like, I make this pretty beastly bomb garlic hummus that maybe I'll make for y'all one day.
Sounds good.
With cilantro and serrano. I hook it up. And it's one of my favorite things to do. One of my best friends is a plant-based chef back at home in Pacoima. And I learned a lot from her. It's like, these are the things you don't buy, you make. And I'm like, all right, like fresh corn, don't buy it canned. Go get it fresh, cut it, freeze it. And the same thing with hummus. And so for me, it's like a ritual that then I share with my students, and I'll take to class. I'll go get some veggies. and they don't want to eat the veggies and want the chips instead. And I'm like, all right, I'll like, just try it, right? I'll make try it. I'm kind of like pushy like that. But I think the exchange of energy is also like it makes them feel good, right? I feel like, and again, there's some tensions between seeing me as a mom or as a maternal figure that I also kind of grapple with, because I know I read some stuff out there too that a lot of we know this, women of color pick up a lot of the labor and mentoring and supporting students and other faculty and other folks. And so I also understand and acknowledge that. So I think for them, it makes them feel happy, like they can give something back, right? For me, what came up as you asked that question and the sun came through, I was like, it's love. It's just love. And I don't know if I can explain beyond that. Like, it's love and respect, and they also in care. But I feel the same way. I am like, you're probably like hustling 2 jobs. And I know most of the students that end up bringing something, I know their story because I've checked in with them before, right? Like, they're hustling multiple jobs, they're caring for an elder, and here they're bringing me something to eat. And mostly it comes from their care, like the folks that they're caring for them that send the food over. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to eat it because, first of all, it's food and I appreciate it. And it's made with love and care. And it's love. That's also all I can think of and feel through. It's just love. There's no other way to explain it.
It's true that it comes from their family. I mean, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I had one student who came to my office and he'd been sick for like 3 weeks. I'm like, I go to the doctor. I don't want to go. I walked him over. It was when I was working at Berkeley. I walked him over, to the medical center, and, then they gave him a test, and then they brought him over to the real hospital, quote unquote. And then they found out he had cancer. And it was this huge, watermelon size in his body tumor. And then from that point on, the mom would he's good. He's doing very well actually now, but his mom would consistently send over food, because it is about if we wouldn't have had that moment, who knows, right? But I do appreciate that idea that it's not just the student, it's also who they're connected to and their family who cares about them. And so the network gets bigger because of that, or the community gets bigger because of that.
I'm hearing the question that I had was one that was on script. And so I'm trying to be responsive to, no, I mean, this is beautiful because it provided some grounding for that question, which was around, what should we offer, or what is there to offer to anyone who might be grounded in these places that could essentially get out of the way so that mother work, mothering could lead, and what were some of the practices. And I'm hearing Allyson, you were talking about presence and relationality as being centered, being fed and feeding people as an example or expression of love, and accepting what gifts are offered, because that also honors or expresses the same sort of both it undermines the motherhood framework, and it also sustains folks. And back when I was first coming into higher ed, I learned this term in loco parentis. Mm-hmm. And so when you first talked about parenthood or motherhood as this juxtaposition to mothering, mother pedagogy, in loco parentis means in place of the parent, which is how colleges and universities set themselves up to be. And I think it maps on to me, when you talk about motherhood, I think fatherhood, parenthood, what that shame and guilt that you heard when the person was telling you you're fucking up, according to their metrics of what it means to be. And so there's all this really fucked up, harmful parenthood, motherhood, fatherhood happening in these spaces. And what I'm hearing and what I've felt in my life has been the ways in which what y'all are talking about exceeds, ruptures, creates pockets for us to exist in these spaces a little bit longer. And knowing that there's also, like, I think back Bert Koiva's work, right, that first brought us together about like the ways in which mothers or those who are in the process of mothering are harmed by it. And I'm just wondering, like, well, what do we, what's this question? Is there a beyond what we're saying, is there anything other to do, you know, with what we inhabit? These are spaces that are doing in loco parentis. Where the ways that we're situated in them, is it possible for us to sustain this? If that is the case, like, what else should we be doing? I'm sorry, y'all, this is like a hard question to get out. What else should we be doing in these spaces or beyond these spaces to sustain our lives, knowing what they're attempting to do to us and against our lives?
This is a question for us, not the institution, right? Because it's a hard question to answer in isolation. Like, what should we do? Because we're doing what we're doing, right? Yeah. So I feel like that there's that, and then it becomes the responsibility for us to either assimilate or acculturate into a system that's problematic or fucked up. I think protecting ourselves is really important. So maybe we didn't talk about that as much. I feel like we already talked about what we do. We're like doing a lot of stuff. But protecting ourselves, and that does require the rest and restoration. But protecting ourselves also means that we're not doing, or we don't tell everyone what we do. I said that to you before, huh? Well, we don't need to tell everyone what we do. I also feel like I want to talk a little bit about, I know it might be a different question, but around the institution, like, what should the institution do? And you said something really important at the very beginning of your question, was just get out of the way. Get out of the way. So we can do our life's work, fulfill our purpose. And so sometimes I toggle between back and forth between what the institution should institutionalize to be better supportive of us. And sometimes I'm like, they're not going to be able to do that. And so just get out of the way. Like, I've heard different suggestions, like, extend maternity leave, like have an option to go maternity leave into sabbatical. I've also even heard, like, when we get evaluated, for tenure, like, allow it to be a category in service. Yeah. I like that idea. But I'm like, well, is there going to be a weird measurement around?
How do you assess that?
How do you assess that I'm being a good mother? Or I don't know, like, I feel like funny, but I do know that the ways that things are measured, I'm on RTP right now, right? I'm always on RTP. Once I got tenure, we're always doing that because we want to make sure our people get through. But one of the things that is hard to measure is service. And so if we were organizing together and it was not official, how do you tell people in my service category, I am serving a community of mothers, a community of people, like, I may not have an email to prove that and so it's interesting, to ask the question, what do we need to do more? Because I think you can't talk about what we need to do more without talking about how the institution needs to change. Or, in your words, blow up. Or this apocalyptic.
That's Christine.
Oh, Christine's words. I don't know. I don't know who said that. But basically, we need an apocalypse in the education system.
Somebody said something. I don't know.
I mean, okay, well, none of us. I said it. It really is. Like, how do you, it is a rethink. So all of those, the institution, of course, is embedded with the ideology of all the things that we hate. but then we want to be accepted in those institutions. So it's this really funny thing that happens that I think I still toggle with. But I will say, when I'm in positions of power in that system, I try to open it up, create vestiges or create opportunities or ways where people can push through, which is another form of mothering, I guess.
Ditto. Ditto. That's a hard question. I do love what you said, Ken. Just folks need to just get out of the way. And I've heard other mothers say that. They just need to let us do our work, get out of the way, let us be. And I feel like it's advice. Like, you don't have to say it that you're doing. And I think that's something I'm also learning from the work we do with Earth and the work that we do as mothers and the work that we do in community. Like, some of those things it's hard to, I don't want to say quantify it. It's important work, right? And even the question about mothering pedagogy, how do you even capture that? It's so complex. And I was thinking earlier, I'm only the expert of my own mothering experience because everybody has a different experience. And even then, I'm not an expert because my son's always teaching me over and over and over. So I'm a student, I'm a learner, I'm undoing, I'm unraveling all the time. And just for me, it's okay, I think I don't have anything to add to that, but to say I love what you're sharing, because then I'm just a witness to that, right? As a new assistant faculty, assistant professor, it just makes me feel seen. It's all right, these are some things I should consider, as I move forward. And I need money so I can give it to my students so we can do dope shit on campus. And the onus doesn't fall on them when it comes to organizing, how it fell on my back, my body, my spirit. That's the other thing I need is get out of the way. So thank you for sharing that. Thanks for asking that hard question.
So thank y'all for dealing with that muddled mess that came your way.
Sounds like mothering to me or parenting.
I mean, I just took some notes. Care, right? The student, the learner, unlearning and unraveling. So I want to say ashe to mothering. Thank you two for being with us today. I've learned so much, and it was you. You were first. You encouraged me. So you tell the story, right? Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Shame.
Thank you. It's so cute.
We will embrace a apocalypse. We will embrace an unveiling that says that education is here to bring us life.